Ever get that, like, pit in your stomach, when you look at your bank account? Or maybe you're lying awake worrying about how you'll ever afford retirement.
Oh, tell me about it.
Yeah, it's like this universal thing, right? This money stress, no matter how much you're making. And today, well, we're really going deep on money.
Deeper than just like, the usual budgeting tips.
Exactly. We're diving into, like, the psychology of it all.
Hmm.
Because I think that's the key.
It's so fascinating, right? How much our feelings about money actually drive our decisions.
Big time. With Farnoosh Torabi.
Okay, yeah, she's great. She's like been a financial expert for like, what, 20 years? Something like that.
Yeah, she's helped a ton of people work through their anxieties about money.
And what I love about her is she really gets that it's not just about learning the like technical side of money, you know?
Right, it's deeper.
Yeah, it's about understanding your own personal relationship with it. Like, what are your fears trying to tell you?
That's such a good point. And then how can you, like, reframe your thinking so that those fears actually help you?
Exactly, instead of holding you back.
In the interview, Tarabi even talked about how money is tied to all these bigger ideas, like scarcity,
Oh, for sure.
risk, even our own identity.
It's heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And when you really think about it that way, it makes sense that, fear is such a common response to money.
Absolutely.
I mean, it represents resources, security, and I think for a lot of us, it represents our ability to take care of the people we love,
That's huge.
There's a lot of pressure.
Said money is power. Like having financial autonomy gives you the ability to, kind of call the shots in your life.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to clarify, though, it's not about power over others.
Right.
It's about having power over your own choices.
Yes. It's about that freedom.
To be able to say yes or no to opportunities, to experiences, without feeling limited by your finances.
And to make choices that really align with your values. I mean, it made me think about that story Mel shared about that restaurant in the Caribbean.
Oh, yeah. The menu with no prices.
Yeah, because they just assumed as a woman she shouldn't have to worry about the cost. I bet that was infuriating.
It is. But it just goes to show you how deep these expectations run about women and money.
Totally.
Like, as Tarabi puts it, that fear of wanting too much. Women are especially conditioned to feel that.
It's so true. It makes me wonder about my own relationship with money. Like, did I pick up anxieties about it from my parents? What kind of messages did I hear growing up?
I think that's a really great question for all of us to consider. Because honestly, the first step to tackling these financial fears is figuring out where they come from.
Yeah, like, are they actually my fears, or are they echoes of, anxieties passed down from, like, previous generations?
Exactly. It's like, are we carrying around our parents' baggage or even our grandparents?
It's so easy to just absorb those messages without even realizing it.
Yeah, so we really need to start examining those beliefs and thinking about, how they might be holding us back. Because like Farnoosh said, money can be a powerful tool for achieving autonomy.
Right. It can give us choices that really align with what we value.
It's not just about the numbers.
Right. It's about what those numbers allow us to do. It's about the life we want to create.
I love that.
So let's talk about those financial fears. Because Farnoosh, she actually identified like 5 major ones that people tend to experience. And I think they really cut across generations.
Yeah, I think we'll all relate to these in some way.
Number 1, probably the most common one, fear of not having enough. And I mean, honestly, with everything going on in the world right now, the rising costs, the economic uncertainty, it's like this fear is more prominent than ever.
For sure. It's a very real fear.
But it also makes sense, right? Like, it's almost primal. That fear of scarcity is just hardwired into us.
Yeah, it's about survival.
But even if you do have enough, there's this flip side.
You mean the fear of losing it all?
That's fear number 2.
It could be anything, really. Losing your job, making a bad investment, an unexpected medical bill, something that just wipes out your savings.
It makes you feel so vulnerable.
Yeah, like you have no control. And we're constantly being reminded, how quickly things can change.
And then there's fear number 3. This one's big for me. The fear of wanting too much.
Ooh, yeah, that's a tricky one.
And as we were talking about earlier, I think this one's particularly loaded for women.
Oh, absolutely. It's like we're taught to shrink ourselves, to be content with what we have, don't rock the boat, don't ask for more.
Yeah, and God forbid you actually dream big when it comes to your finances.
Right. It's like, where's the line between healthy ambition and, like, greed?
It's such a blurry line. And honestly, it's exhausting trying to figure it out. Okay, let's move on to fear number 4. This one's all about the kids.
You mean messing up your kids' relationship with money?
Exactly. It's like you worry about being too strict or too lenient. I mean, some parents are super focused on saving.
Yeah, and they might accidentally create this sense of scarcity for their kids.
Right. While others might overindulge and not teach their kids the value of, like, financial responsibility.
It's finding that balance.
It's tough.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It's funny, though. I used to think that younger generations wouldn't have these same money fears, but
But they actually do.
yeah, I mean, Farnoosh and Mill brought up this stat. Millennials and Gen Z are actually more afraid of running out of money than older generations.
Seriously. That's so interesting.
I know, right? It seems counterintuitive, but then when you think about the world they've inherited, it kind of makes sense. The student loan debt, the crazy housing market.
Yeah, the whole job market feels less stable than it used to.
Yeah, it's a lot to deal with. Okay, on to the final fear, number 5. This one feels like the heaviest, I think. The fear of dying without leaving a financial legacy.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It's about wanting to provide for your loved ones, even after you're gone.
That sense of responsibility.
And maybe it's about making a difference in the world, leaving a charitable donation, or, just knowing that you've made a positive impact.
It's about meaning, too.
Yeah, exactly. And Farnoosh pointed out that a lot of people avoid estate planning and, like, end-of-life conversations because it's just too emotionally charged. But avoiding those conversations just makes the fear worse, right?
It does. Like anything, when you push those fears down, they just fester and grow bigger.
It's so true. What's really fascinating to me is how all of these fears play out in our relationships. I mean, think about how many couples argue about money.
All the time.
But it's rarely just about the money, right?
No, never. It's all these other anxieties and unmet needs bubbling to the surface.
Yeah, money becomes this, like, a symbol for deeper issues. Like, you might be arguing about spending, but underneath it, you're actually fighting about control or security or even self-worth.
Like a proxy battle.
Exactly. So before you can even start addressing the practical financial stuff, you need to unpack all that emotional baggage.
Yeah, deal with the feelings first.
Right. And that's where Tarabi's 4th F comes in. Figure it out.
Oh, I love that. It's so simple, but it's so true.
It's not about ignoring the fear.
It's about using it as fuel.
Exactly. It's like, okay, you're scared. Now what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. How can we turn this fear into action?
So before we get into the how, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll talk about some specific techniques and strategies for, actually facing those financial fears and building a more empowered relationship with money.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we've named these big 5 financial fears: not having enough, losing it all, wanting too much, messing up our kids with money, and not leaving a legacy. But how do we, actually move past the fear part and make some positive changes?
Well, Tarabi had some great advice on that. Remember that dark place thing we talked about?
Yeah.
Before the break, where you imagine, the worst case financial scenario.
Oh, yeah, the one where I'm picturing, myself working 3 jobs at 80 because I didn't save enough. Not exactly a fun visualization.
It's not the most pleasant mental exercise, I'll give you that.
Definitely not.
But it can be seriously powerful, though. By forcing yourself to really confront that worst case scenario, you can actually start to, chip away at the fear and take back some control.
So instead of just being paralyzed by it, I should use it as motivation to make a plan.
Exactly. It's about asking yourself, okay, what would I actually do if this happened? You might be surprised at the solutions you come up with.
It's like turning that vague, scary feeling into concrete steps.
And that shift, right, from feeling helpless to feeling empowered, that can make a huge difference.
Totally. Okay, so that's one technique. What else did Tarabi recommend?
She also talked about taking inventory. And not just of your, bank accounts and investments.
Yeah.
It's about looking at all your resources, tangible and intangible.
Oh, I like that. So it's like reminding myself of everything I do have instead of focusing on what I lack.
Yes. Think about your skills, your experience, your network, your ability to learn and adapt. These are all valuable assets that you can use even if you, hit a rough patch financially.
It's funny. This reminds me of something my grandma used to say. She'd always say, you can lose all your money, but you'll always have your brains in your 2 hands. It's about recognizing that inner resourcefulness, right?
Exactly. And it shifts the focus from scarcity to abundance.
Yeah.
Even if you face challenges, you still have a foundation to build on. You have the power to create new opportunities for yourself.
Okay, I'm really digging this reframe. It's about focusing on what you can control instead of getting stuck in that cycle of fear, the what ifs. But let's be honest, sometimes the fear comes from just not understanding how things work. Like, I'm still trying to wrap my head around the whole investing thing.
I feel you. That's where financial literacy comes in. Tarabi was really big on that. She said a lot of our fears, they just come from not knowing enough about how money works, period.
Oh, for sure. It's like if you don't understand something, it's natural to be afraid of it. But if you take the time to learn, it becomes a lot less scary.
Exactly. And there's so many resources out there now. Books, podcasts, online courses, financial advisors. You don't have to become a Wall Street whiz overnight. But just taking the time to educate yourself can seriously change the game.
Knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to money.
Totally. The more you know about budgeting, saving, investing, managing debt, the more confident you're going to feel making those decisions.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I'm with you on all of this so far. But there's still this one concept that I'm kind of wrestling with, the whole money is power thing. I don't know, it just feels a little icky to me, like it's all about greed and status and...
I hear you. The word power definitely has some baggage. But remember how Mel and Farnoosh were talking about it. It's not about having power over other people.
Right.
It's about having power over your own life, your choices, your future.
Like that freedom to walk away from a job that's making you miserable or to support a cause that you're passionate about, that kind of power feels different.
Totally different. And I think that's why it's so important to reframe our whole relationship with money. It's not about accumulating wealth for the sake of it. It's about building that foundation that gives you the freedom and the security to live a life that aligns with your values.
I'm starting to see it differently now. It's not about being rich. It's about having that financial stability to do the things that matter to you.
You're getting it.
Yeah.
Financial freedom looks different for everyone. It's about defining what matters to you and building a financial life that supports those goals.
I love that. So we've talked about facing those fears, taking stock of our resources, building our knowledge. But how do we translate all of this into concrete action? What are the next steps?
Well, that's exactly what we're going to dive into in the last part of our deep dive. We'll get super specific and talk about how to create a personalized plan to address your unique financial fears and start taking those first steps towards a more empowered future.
Okay, I'm ready to actually make a plan. We've been talking about the feelings and everything, but now I want to know, how do we take all of Farnoosh's great advice and actually apply it to my own life?
Well, it really comes down to, creating a plan that's tailored to you.
Yeah.
That addresses your specific fears and your goals, because financial freedom, it looks different for everyone.
Right. Okay. So step one, I guess, is to figure out what those fears are, right? Sit down and really ask myself, what is it about money that keeps me up at night?
Exactly. And don't just skim the surface.
Yeah.
Really try to understand where those fears are coming from. Are they tied to past experiences or messages you got from your family?
Oh, yeah. The family stuff can be huge.
Right. Or maybe it's, those societal expectations we were talking about earlier, those voices in your head that say you shouldn't want too much or money is bad.
Oh, man, those voices can be so loud. Okay, so once I've kind of pinpointed what I'm actually afraid of, what's next?
Then it's time to, create a plan of attack.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where it gets practical.
Mm.
What steps can you take to address those fears and start building the financial future you actually want?
Can we walk through an example? Let's say my biggest fear is not having enough saved for retirement. What would that plan even look like?
Okay, so first, you want to figure out where you stand right now. How much have you already saved? What do you think your expenses are going to be in retirement? There are a ton of online calculators that can help you, estimate that stuff.
So it's all about information gathering, really, arming myself with knowledge.
Exactly. And then, based on those numbers, you can set some realistic savings goals. Don't get overwhelmed trying to save $1 zillion all at once.
Oh, good, because that was my next question.
Even small contributions, if you do it consistently, it can make a huge difference over time, especially with compound interest. That's the magic part.
Okay, so that's good to know. It makes me feel a little less panicked.
Good. So maybe you start with setting up automatic transfers to your retirement account every month, even if it's just a small amount.
That's a good idea. I could do that. What if, my fear is more about debt, though? Right now, I'm just feeling super overwhelmed by credit cards and student loans.
Okay, well, in that case, your plan might involve creating a really detailed budget so you can see, okay, where's your money actually going? You could also look into debt consolidation, maybe lower your interest rates, and don't be afraid to talk to a financial advisor. They can help you come up with a debt management plan that works for you.
It's all about being proactive, right? Not just like hiding from the problem.
Exactly. Because burying your head in the sand, it never helps. It just makes things worse in the long run. But once you start taking action, even baby steps, you're going to feel more in control.
And that feeling of control, that can be huge when you've been feeling trapped by debt. Okay, here's another one. This is a big fear of mine. Investing. Like, I know I should be investing, but honestly, I'm just terrified of messing it up and losing everything.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
It's a super common fear. And a lot of times it comes from, just not really understanding how investing works.
Yeah.
So like with debt, education is key.
So how do I learn about investing without, getting totally overwhelmed?
There are so many resources out there. Start with, books or articles or online courses that explain the basics in a way that makes sense to you. And if you're really feeling lost, talk to a financial advisor. They can help you create a strategy that aligns with, your risk tolerance and your goals.
It's about starting slow and figuring out what feels right for me.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you dip your toe in with like a low-risk index fund, or you try out one of those robo-advisors. They can be good for beginners. There are tons of options. The key is to take that first step and just start building your confidence as an investor.
Okay, I'm noticing a pattern here. No matter what the financial fear is, there's a plan I can create to deal with it.
That's the thing, right? You have more power than you think.
It's just about figuring out how to use it.
And the most important thing is to acknowledge that fear is normal. It's okay to feel scared or confused or overwhelmed, but don't let those feelings stop you from taking action.
It's not about being fearless. It's about becoming, fear-aware.
I love that. Fear-aware and empowered.
Yeah.
When you understand your fears, you can actually use them as, fuel to create change.
It's kind of a superpower when you think about it.
Exactly. So to wrap things up, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this deep dive?
I want them to remember that financial fear, it's part of being human, but it doesn't have to control us. By facing our fears head on, by understanding where they come from, and by taking action, even small actions, we can actually transform those fears into something positive. We can build a brighter future.
So well said. And remember, this is a journey, not a destination.
It's okay to stumble, Make mistakes, ask for help along the way. That's part of the process. But by embracing the journey and becoming, fear-aware and empowered, we can create a financial life that feels secure and abundant and truly aligned with our values.
I love that. Aligned with our values. So ask yourself, what's one action, even a tiny one, that you can take today to start facing those fears?
And move towards the financial freedom you deserve. Thanks for joining us today on this deep dive into conquering financial fear. We hope you feel inspired to get out there and start building that amazing future.